Let me add my welcome to each of you to the City of Boston, and we are so excited to have you here. Our panel this afternoon is composed of members of the Curia Secretariat. These Jesuits serve as advisors to Father General, keeping him updated on how the Jesuit mission is being lived out in their area of responsibility, about current developments in their sectors, and ways to further the mission of the Society in our global world. Traditionally, secretariats were assigned to a specific sector, such as education, formation, spirituality, and lived in Rome. Many changes have come about because of GC 35. There were major recommendations at this last congregation to adapt the governance structure of the Society, including the Curia, with the purpose of working across sectors intentionally, to be more intentional in promoting collaboration, to work as one in one mission of the Society of Jesus. Father Nicholas has embraced this, working with his secretariats. He has been working to determine how to do this best. This morning we heard from Father Jose Mesa, as we know, our Secretary for Secondary and Pre-Secondary Education, and he lives in Chicago. This is something new. This afternoon, our panel includes the other four secretariats: Father Jerry Blaschek, Secretary for Secretary for the Service of Faith; Father Tony De Silva, Secretary for Collaboration with Others; Father Francisco Alvarez, Secretary for the Promotion of Justice and Ecology; and Father Michael Garanzini, Secretary for Higher Education. Each secretariat is going to share his perspective on the challenges that lie ahead for our schools in our present global context, and how our school leaders can go about meeting these challenges. They're going to discuss how the school's leadership framed this colloquium within the broader picture of the Society's mission in our world today.
Good afternoon to all of you. As Gary said, it is a custom in some places to have a siesta. Well, I will not invite you to a siesta here, but I'm really delighted to be here and to speak to you and to share with you a few ideas on what we are trying to do in Rome with regard to collaboration, with regard to the concept of mission. So right in the beginning, I shall present a slide and explain first the general structure of governance in the Society and the kind of change Father Nicholas is trying to bring about after GC 35. As you see from this slide, Father General is right up there, he's sitting on top. But what is more interesting is to see who's sitting below him, because these are the organs of the government of the Society of Jesus. Many of you have been asking me here and there outside the hall, what are you guys secretaries doing in Rome, besides, of course, having a good time? But I thought maybe a little bit of an explanation would be helpful to you, especially for those of you not acquainted with the government of the Society. Basically, Father General does these two great things. He keeps the Society going from these two angles. Cura personalis, the Latin, for he takes care of his people, the persons of the Society. So he takes care of them, so cura personalis. And on the right-hand side, he takes care of cura apostolica, of the works of the Society, the ministries, what we refer to, or the apostolates, however word you want to use. So these are the two, really the summary of the government of the Society and the responsibility of Father General. And these responsibilities, he has these structures in place. Okay, this side. He has got a general council, which is made up of 12 counselors, with whom he meets every morning at 8 o'clock, just for information in case you decide to phone him up. It's at 8 o'clock in the morning. He meets up with his council. It's very early for Italy, but they're all there present. And he discusses with them the ordinary government of the society, what is going on in the society every day. He has to address these issues, so he takes care together with his counselors. He also is in touch with major superiors, who are also called provincials, across the 90-odd provinces in the Society of Jesus. So he takes care of that. He also is in touch with the presidents of conferences. This morning you saw the conference secretaries talking, the 6 of them. So there are 6 conferences, like the 5 continents. There are 6 because Asia has 2, Asia Pacific and South Asia. That's how there are 6, otherwise it would have been 5. So he's in touch with them too. And lastly, he's in touch with local superiors of communities. So this is how the ordinary government of the society works every day. So the general therefore has less time or little time to address these kinds of issues of the apostolic work of the society. So he felt after GC 35, a very helpful thing would be if he could get 3 secretaries to work in the Curia, to live there, and he has given 3 assistants also who work with the secretaries. And so we have these 3 secretariats of faith, of justice, and for collaboration. For faith, for justice, for collaboration. And each of these secretariats has 3 assistants assigned to them, with whom they think, they plan, they work, etc. So all of these lines, as you see, finally lead to Father General. The 3 secretaries also have a direct line of access to Father General. They can bypass the assistants and they can also relate directly to him, which we do. And we report regularly to him, as we will do after this meeting, for example. And there is also horizontal relationship between us. So there is vertical as well as horizontal. So this is more or less how the government runs. So you have an idea how we input into the general's planning and into the council's planning, etc. Okay. So the focus for us, the secretaries, is on mission. But Father General, as was said in the introduction, did not want the sectors, the separate sectors like education, pastoral, social, etc. He prefers that mission be looked at from 3 dimensions. That every Jesuit work, that means every Jesuit mission, has to have these 3 dimensions existing in the work. There has to be a faith dimension, a justice dimension, and a collaboration dimension. This you heard in the morning in the reports that were given. How these 3 continuously interact, you see from these arrows, and they feed into each other. So there is a unitary concept of mission with 3 dimensions. And we are the ones who are studying the 3 dimensions and helping to give feedback to Father General, feedback to men in the field. We animate people working in the field, etc., as you will hear from the other secretaries. This is another portrayal of the same thing. This is mission with its 3 dimensions. Okay, so if anybody asks us, what is the mission of the society? This is how it is defined. At the service of faith for the promotion of justice in collaboration with all. These are the 3 aspects. This is a brief summary of what is Jesuit mission. This is the mission. I will now speak about collaboration specifically. The other secretaries will address faith and justice. So, why collaboration? Obviously, collaboration, as we see collaboration happening here, right here on the floor, as we saw yesterday, we heard lay people come up there, say what they had thought about this whole, how they worked out this whole plan, how they worked with Jesuits, and so on and so forth. So not like collaboration is something new. Collaboration is happening already worldwide in the society. But we want to focus on it, and we want to make it the style of life of the Jesuits. This will be the way of proceeding in future for Jesuit ministry. That all Jesuit ministries have to have the angle of collaboration built into them. And so this will be an insistence from our side. This will be an effort to animate groups that are working in the field and to build up collaboration. So we collaborate, Okay, the theology, I will not go into all these details because they've given us only 12 minutes, as you can imagine. So I cannot dish out to you theology in 12 minutes. Okay, but basically, the whole concept is mission is about relationships. We have to work together, otherwise we cannot build a new world. Gone are the days when Jesuits thought they could have built the world by themselves. So those days are passé. Now we have to look out for collaborators, for partners, for friends, for men and women of goodwill. So, but if you want the theological basis already in the Old Testament, the covenant relationship, partnership between Israel and God, Yahweh, New Testament, how Jesus called his disciples in a relationship, how he sent them out on mission. St. Ignatius, before he was ordained, he already was collaborating with lay people in giving the exercises, etc. Vatican II already stressed lay people. And decrees 34, GC 34 and GC 35 have stressed this much. Much of this information is also available in the paper that will be given to you, not today, but it will be given to you, I believe, in the pen drive. So you will see there is strong foundation why collaboration is an absolute must and why collaboration will be of great benefit to Jesuit work. With whom do we collaborate? Okay, with fellow Jesuits, first and foremost to begin with, because sometimes, as you know, Jesuits also move on parallel tracks and they don't know each other. Okay, with whom do we collaborate? Like I said, with fellow Jesuits, with provinces and conferences. Something new has come here. Father General is insisting that a Jesuit novice who joins the novitiate does not join a province, he joins the Society of Jesus. It happens that he is in a province for administrative reasons, but he's a member of the society, not primarily a member of the province. So he's available for mission all over the world, for universal mission. We have collaborators in examples that have been mentioned here in the morning. JRS, Fe Alegria, we have AIDS network in Africa, and so on and so forth. We also collaborate with the Ignatian family, meaning to say other religious women and men who share the Ignatian spirituality and the Ignatian vision. We also collaborate with lay people who are members of CVX or CLC. That is also very widespread. And Jesuit volunteers, and also other men of goodwill and women of goodwill who may not share our faith, but share our goodwill and our values. Where do we collaborate? Nationally and internationally. Okay, so today Father General is insisting also that we don't work within one culture, within the borders of a nation, that we have to be ready to work internationally across borders and also across sectors. So we can't say I'm in education, so I don't do pastoral work, or I'm in a pastoral field, I don't go into the other field. All fields, as much as possible, Jesuits should be able to allow them to intersect and to bring in all the three dimensions. Last slide. How do we do this? Okay, very important is formation work. And there are formation programs now being built to train lay leaders as well as to train Jesuits how to work with lay people. That too, many Jesuits are falling short of, and so there is a great need. There are many programs in the United States, there is also in Spain and many other countries. We can coordinate that from the Curia in Rome. Okay, willingness also to share resources, as was mentioned in the morning, okay, infrastructural, financial, etc. And so the great dream and desire is that we have faith, justice, and collaboration present in all the works. Thank you.
As Secretary for the Service of Faith, I think I have to begin by honing in on what many commentators on Ignatian spirituality would say is the absolute core of Ignatian spirituality, and that is gratitude. The commentator, the most known early commentator on Ignatius was Jerónimo Nadal. Anybody who's a Jesuit or familiar with this tribe knows that we use his name a lot. Nadal said that according to Ignatius, el pecado madre, the mother sin, is ingratitude. And that from gratitude, from an awareness, from an interior consciousness of all that is being given to us, is called out of us, is evoked a response of awe, generosity, and a desire to give back what we have been given. So I begin my very limited presentation with gratitude. Gratitude to you who have come from so many places and who have committed your lives to the work of education. I thank you first of all simply as your brother, that you have looked at the human family and decided that our future depends on our youth. And so you have given your substantial talents and dedicated years of education and building up of expertise to care for the next generation of our human family. And for your doing that, I say thank you. As a Jesuit who is an educator, I say thank you for giving your lives to education. Like you, I understand that education can be immensely gratifying. To be a teacher, an administrator, a counselor can be immensely fulfilling. But I also understand that it can be immensely frustrating, that many of you are underpaid, underappreciated, and that daily your work depends on an act of hope. You keep investing, many times not seeing the result of your work, but you do it. So to you, my fellow educators, for your commitment, your patience, your humility, your self-transcendence, I say thank you. Finally, specifically as a Jesuit, I thank God that somehow or other, divine providence wove your personal history into the history of our Ignatian family. I thank God that you have found yourself, however it happened, as part of this Ignatian apostolic family that does the work of the Society's mission through education. Without you, it would be over. Without you, there would be no flesh and blood. There would be no structure. There would be no actuality to the mission that God gave to the church through the Society, had not each one of you, in his or her own way, said a yes, and if you did not day by day continue to say yes. And so I hope in fidelity to the core of Ignatian spirituality that I am supposed to have some charge for, I say again to you, thank you, and thank you. I said that somehow in the mystery of God's providence, your lives, your work, your talents have become the texture, have been woven into the ministry of the Society, which we've heard a few times already articulated so powerfully as the service of faith, doing the work of justice in collaboration and with reverence and dialogue with other religious traditions. how is it that you have found your way into this mission? How is it that you too are now part of this Ignatian way of proceeding? Far before Ignatius and his university friends came up with the notion of founding a religious order, they were a group of friends, and at the brink of being divided and sent to various destinations, they came to the reasoned, discerned perception that they were called to be a group that would cohere, that would remain united. And they were able to identify certain ways of proceeding. In theological language that was current since Vatican II, we called that the elements of a religious charism. Religious charism comes from the Greek word that means a gift from the Holy Spirit that is given for the upbuilding of the entire church. Ignatian spirituality and Ignatian ways of doing ministry, such as you do in every one of your schools, is the result of God's gift through the Holy Spirit for the sake of upbuilding God's world. Our present Father General likes very much to use the term Missio Dei, that is what we are about. The charism of Ignatius that we all share and realize in our time is in order that God's great plan, God's desire for the whole world be realized. A vision that in Jesus' time was articulated with the language of the reign of God. Let God reign over the universe. Let there be reconciliation and healing among people, among nations, and between human beings and the created order. And let all people live in the shalom, the well-being, the balance, the harmony that comes from reconciliation. But we who are part of this Ignatian family, we, as Tony expressed it so clearly, we have certain family characteristics. Our service and the mission and the specific identity of our schools will depend on our being very clear to understand what is it that marks our way of proceeding as members of the Ignatian family. When Jesuits got together in 1995 for the 34th General Congregation, they came up with a document in which they enumerated what they called the characteristics of our way of proceeding. I am going to speed through them, but I hope when you go home you will make sure you get that document again and think it through and pray it through and ask how these characteristics should shape, already do shape, or invite you to a reform, to a change, to a deepening in the way you do education. The first of the characteristics is, the first of our ways of proceeding is a deep personal attachment to the person of Christ. There it is, laid out clearly. Any school that wants to claim that it is Jesuit, that it is part of an Ignatian way of proceeding, proceeds from a knowledge and a personal approach and assimilation and an attachment, not just to the person of Jesus as an object of devotion or admiration, but a connection to the person of Jesus that leads me into a new way of seeing the world, a new way of hoping, a new way of valuing, a new way of understanding myself and my relationships. This kind of personal, to my heart, to my gut, to my head, to my entire person, this transformative assimilation, adhering to the person of Jesus, is what we would like our students, at least those who are Christian or those who are searching, to have an opportunity to do. We would like them to meet Christ in such a way and to learn our Christian tradition in such a way that their lives too might be countercultural, creative, and finally fulfilled. Our Ignatian way, I'm getting nervous because she's already waving the flag at me. So if I become more incoherent, don't blame it on my poor planning, but the little amount of time. We're called to be, another characteristic of us is that we are called to be contemplatives in action, which, as Jose said this morning, means that we, like Ignatius in this family, believe that God is working everywhere and in every human experience. And so, with great reverence for culture, we are looking for the presence and action of God in all cultures, and also in all peoples, and also in all the experiences of our students. So what should mark our school tone, our school ethos, is this respect for the God who is already working. We are to be, as part of this Ignatian family, an apostolic body in the church. I mentioned that the early Jesuits believed that they were called to be together. And Father Nicolas and the last General Congregation have called our attention to this in a new way. A Jesuit school and a Jesuit apostolate is not something that simply does work, but understands that it is a community. And so we again need to ask ourselves, to what extent, in all of the ways that our school is structured and our culture is devised, are we truly a community? And do we treat people as members of a community in the church? We do not apologize for being part of the church. And Father General has reminded us that wherever we find ourselves, we are invited to, in one way or another, become bridges to a church which is wounded, which is suffering, and that we can be instruments of greater reconciliation and peace. Let me just read you the others. We should be a community in solidarity with those most in need. I'm happy to be able to pass the baton to Pachi, who will explain how that should happen in our schools. We should be a community in fellowship and in partnership with others. Tony has already talked about that. We are institutions where we are characterized by learned ministry. We should do whatever we do thoroughly and well, rigorously, and demand the same thing from our students. Finally, we should be available to new missions, always searching for the Magus. I leave you with a quotation from that document to which I referred you. Never content with the status quo, the known, the tried, the already existing, we are constantly driven to discover, to redefine, to reach out for the Magus. Indeed, this document reminds us what must characterize our Ignatian family's way of being together and working in education, as in everything else, is a certain holy boldness, a certain apostolic aggressivity, all for the glory of God, a readiness always to reassess, re-examine, how can we be of greater service, of more universal service to God's people, especially those who have been most likely to be neglected and forgotten. I hope that during our time of discussion I'll be able to fill in some of the many gaps that I left. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. I'm going to speak a little bit about the challenges of the society in the field of education, especially coming from the point of view of this promotion of justice. I have put the title, Good Education for All. Well, Ignatius didn't think that Jesuits would be involved in education. So at the very beginning, the first Jesuits thought their mission would be short and flexible. See how he says in the Constitutions, because the members of this society ought to be ready at any hour to go to any part of the world where they may be sent. He thought that the model would be that one of St. Francis Xavier, and that Jesuits were not called to settle down in any place. But they always were trying to look for God's call. And they were called to educate. You have there a beautiful picture of the cathedral now in La Habana, a former school in Cuba. In 1548, they were called to Messina to found the first school to give instruction to the children of the city. But then many other demands came from other cities. When St. Ignatius died, there were more than 40 schools, mainly all over Europe. They were the first schools in those places. They were trying to respond to one demand. For centuries, the Jesuits gave instruction to the leading classes in many countries, contributing to the growth of these societies. It was a remarkable contribution. And Ignatian spirituality has always been the ground of this education, because Ignatian spirituality helps people grow. And whatever education we give is grounded always in Ignatian spirituality. Probably that's the key of its success, let's say. Then we were called to teach the poor. In the last centuries, education has become a right of every person that the state has to provide. But still, many children do not receive it. There is a very nice example, a symbol of how the Jesuits became involved in this education to the poor. In 1955, Abraham Reyes, a construction worker, offered his house, his family was of 7 children, offered his house to Father Velas in Caracas. I offer my house as a school if you bring the teachers. That's how it all began. Fe y Alegría began like this. Today more than 1 million poor children receive education through Fe y Alegría. And in the last decades, Dalits and Adivasis in India have become students in many Jesuit schools. And today in the morning, Father Fido was reminding us that also GRS is doing this. Are there still calls today? Well, the situation is difficult. 70 million children do not go to school. Girls suffer more than boys in this regard. Another 70 million do not finish school, sometimes simply because they cannot pay for it. Handicaps, people with disabilities, have far less opportunities, and there is a lack of quality education in so many places, in so many countries. It's true, we cannot reach all these people, but perhaps we can do something. Contributing to the missions of recent general congregations, I'm going to speak about these 4 challenges: a universal horizon, quality education for all, education that aspires to improve our societies for the benefit of the least advantaged, and promoting green schools. In our schools, we educate a number of students. We saw in the morning a big number of students. But we aspire to a quality education for all the children. We do not only work for our children, but we would like good education for all the children. The world is not only our house, the world is everybody's house. That means that our commitment requires not only that we educate, but also involves our demand of quality of education for all. How can we done this? Mainly advocating politically so that all children may receive good education without discrimination on economic or ethnic grounds. Discrimination on ethnic grounds continues to be present in many of our countries. It's incredible. and we have a big, large credibility. So we can say many things about this education for all. Look at this wonderful sentence from one university president in the day of graduation to his students. We do not want successful professionals in failed societies. So we work for the improvement of our societies, and I think most of our schools are doing this. We educate students to contribute to a more just and harmonious society. We are doing this, as I tell you, in many ways. Offering social services, involving people in local citizens' initiatives, encouraging parents' associations, participating in Ignatian lay communities, and doing all this in alliance with other works of the society, in order to demonstrate corporate credibility, this apostolic body that we are, and to establish a social base for sharing horizons and values. For the benefit also of the least advantaged, Ignatius always asked Jesuits to discern the best service they could offer. He was speaking mainly about the magis. Magis in education frequently has been translated into excellence. Excellence means not success. Excellence means a passion response, means love, means magis, big generosity because of big gratitude. So he was asking Jesuits to look first where the greater need was, then where could be produced more fruit. He was also asking them to see where there was greater duty to make return for what has been received, and finally, where our service could be multiplied more, in this order. If our education is really good, and we believe it is, we should offer it first and foremost to children with fewer opportunities. This is what is asked of us by our Ignatian and Jesuit tradition. Our most long-lived institutions, and sometimes most wealthiest, have to examine whether our Jesuit presence continues to be needed. Most likely, and this is very disturbing, I think, most likely our students would receive a quality education even if we were not there. Perhaps we do not need to be there, and there are children in other places who are waiting for our arrival. This is a place for discernment. Promoting green schools. In May, we gathered some information about the activities that are held in the high schools on environment, and there are many, a huge amount of them. Developing educational space free of pollution and toxic materials, using recyclables, creating some green space on the campuses, and offering courses on ecology and the environment. I'll try to finish with this comment, offering a universal mission in a fragmented world. We live in a quite fragmented world. We don't have the common cultural references that we had in the past. We miss a common narrative of what the world could be, has been, and should be. And I think this is really counteracting against hope. And we need hope, and our students need hope. Could we offer a universal mission, something more universal? In our Jesuit tradition, this universal vision is what was offered in the Ratio Studiorum. It was a vision that developed character, provided a critical perspective, criticism too, To be critical is very important in Ignatian spirituality. Encouraging hope for the world and moving people to collaborate. And I leave you one question there. I think we still need something of that sort. Should not we try to work together in an endeavor as important as this one, a meaningful vision that takes complexity into account, that brings hope for a better world, and that calls us for commitment?
With the brief time that I have, I want to talk to you about the Secretariat for Higher Education. I'm the other half of Jose. Since town people have had the office, it's taken two to take their places. So I have the higher ed part. And what I'd like to do is just briefly do a little comparison between the issues we face and the issues that you face in secondary education. What I think are the chief challenges that we face in higher education around the world, among the Jesuit schools, and then a little bit about what we're doing or trying to do to address that. As was just said, I've only been in the job for about 10 months, so I'm learning myself, but it's a steep learning curve. How we compare ourselves with you. I think there's much that higher education has learned and is learning from Jesuit secondary education. You have much clearer, and for a long time have worked on what you expect of each graduate at the end of their time with you. That has not been so clear. Assessment has not been so clear in higher education. It's obtaining a degree, it's following the rules that universities set up for those attainments of those degrees without a lot of attention to the formation of character and so on. So I think we have that to learn from secondary ed, and I think many of the schools are learning that. You have paid more attention to faculty development and administration development. And I sense now around the world in our regions, our 6 regions, that universities are just beginning to understand that the faculty, development of faculty in the mission, inviting people to enter into the mission is critical. There's debates about whether or not one recruits for mission, hires for mission, or in fact one orients for mission once someone is recruited. It's probably both, but we're just beginning to pay attention to that now. Most of those regions of the world that have Higher Education Association of Jesuit institutions are in fact sponsoring workshops, programs for administrators and faculty. Of course, you've been doing that for quite a long time. When it comes to clarity about mission and identity, I think Jesuit institutions around the world are still struggling with how exactly to explain their mission and identity in clear Jesuit and Catholic terms. And that's partly a result of a lot of secularization, which I'll talk about in just a second, but it's also the nature of the beast. Higher education has resisted it more. But on the other hand, what I see happening around the world is a growing sense that what Jesuit higher education has to offer, again, you know this already, is something unique that their sister institutions, secular, other privates and so on, do not offer. And so I think we're getting the message that we need to do something about clarity of mission and identity. And that too is a commonly focused theme of meetings of schools region-wide and internationally when we get together. And finally, I think we're all adjusting to the impact of technology on student learning. Again, many of your schools are ahead of that already, and I think we're learning from you what are the best uses of technology and media in reaching young people today. They are media savvy themselves, they're technology savvy themselves, and we know that the way they acquire information has in fact changed them. their brains are different because of the way they access technology and the way they use technology, and higher education is slowly catching up with that fact. We are about 190 institutions of a rich variety, from large, full, multi-campus universities in various parts of the world, all the way down to smaller institutes. I say around 190 because it depends how you count. There are theology faculties in Europe that have their own students. They constitute what we would call a single department in a larger multi-university. So it depends how you count what is a university, but there's essentially 190 of us, and there must be 580 regular high schools, and then the Fayette Agreeing Network with more than 1,000 more. So again, you're much larger in size. Our challenges. I've hinted a little bit at what I think our challenges are, but let me go through some of those again. Secularization. The academy, higher ed academy, is a much more secularized place. As you well know, you've all been to universities and you know just how secular they can be. Some parts of the world are much more secular than others. The issues in Europe, the United States, and higher education, of course, are very different than they are in other parts of the world, but secularization is a phenomenon that all of us deal with, and our faculty come from training in disciplines in faculties that are highly secularized. So they come with as many questions about faith as our students have in many cases. The challenge of thinking with the church. It will come as no surprise to you that higher education faculties think of themselves as quite independent in their thinking, quite different, another being, if you will, than the church, and sometimes highly critical of the church. And so I think one of our challenges in Jesuit higher education is not simply to ape what's going on in secular institutions when it comes to stance on religion and faith, the role of faith in life, but how to help our faculty understand what the church's message is, the complexities of that, and I'll leave the rest of this discussion to Father Lombardi for tomorrow. The challenge of these rapid changes due to technology. Every institution of higher education wants to do the best it can to bring knowledge to its students. How does that work in a classroom, and how do we hold attentions of students? And the related question of the financial cost of this. Another challenge, of course, is the financial cost of higher education, competing for hiring of faculty and so on. And all of us, all over the world, are dealing, like you, with the cost of with the challenge of financial containment. We're all dealing as well with the impact of what I'll call the new environmental urgency. That is the growing understanding in science and the social sciences and among our students that the planet is in trouble. And if there is an issue which we find unites people around the world, it's the issue of this environmental challenge. And that holds some particular interesting possibilities, I think, for us, which I'll speak about in just a moment. And then finally, the challenge of access. Higher education, no matter where you go, is expensive. Even when it's supported by the state, it requires the luxury of being able to spend time, and a good amount of time, out of the workforce. And so access for the marginalized, access for the poorer members and people of the lower socioeconomic rung of society is a challenge everywhere. And we know that for many of our schools, all private, all tuition charging, that means that we do not have a fair proportion of those who are economically challenged in our institutions. Again, you You have had more luck with that. You've done some better planning, and perhaps things like Fe y Alegría, Cristo Rey, and so on. Those networks have landed in your lap, and they are a way in which secondary education reaches the marginalized. We have not yet found a way for higher education to reach the marginalized, with an exception or two. Let me say a little bit about what we're doing. The third thing, we had our large meeting like this in Mexico City 2 years ago. From that, we've seen a growth of regional networks and more collaboration across networks, and even within networks of high school, university folks getting together with other apostolates as well. We have a growing group of professionals that want to network across the world internationally. I'm thinking of business deans and business faculty. There are medical and health faculty that want to collaborate across the world to look at public health problems together. There are people that are looking at problems that the church faces, theological issues that are starting to collaborate, and again, the environment. So I have hope that I think that we're going to be seeing much more collaboration among the Jesuit schools. There's a very strong interest in that. And just 2 examples that I'll point out before my time is up. One is a collaboration on building a school in Hong Kong. Hong Kong and Africa are priorities for the Society of Jesus, or China and Africa. There's an opportunity for us to start, perhaps, to start a university in Hong Kong. We have a bid in for a piece of land that will be given by the state. Jesuit schools from around the world came together and are ready to start that school if we receive the bid. In Africa, there are 3 or 4 of the provinces are highly anxious to begin higher education work, and it's been especially our business schools that have come together, and they are working with people that have been designated by the provincial to begin planning for schools in various places in Africa. About 3 really are just on the cusp, just ready to start an institution of higher education, probably a business school, perhaps then a school of pedagogy, and perhaps a school of engineering are on the boards, that are on the drawing boards for this. Those are very important, I think, in growing possibilities. And the last one that I'll mention is a growing network around environment. We're looking at collecting, starting in Chicago, in my university, a group of 20 experts in the environment through the sciences and social sciences of ethics and philosophy and theology. We're looking at collecting them for building an online curriculum for teaching environmental science, environmental ethics, environmental ecology, economy, and so forth. That would be available to all of the schools, including the high schools, for either teaching, outright teaching, or for resources to faculty. So that is coming up. We have our first $100,000 grant to keep that group studying, going, and writing, and then putting things on the network. So I'm very hopeful. I think it's an exciting time for the universities, and I'm delighted to be here with you too.
Buenas tardes. José Leonardo Rincón de Colombia. Tengo 30 años en la educación secundaria, pero en los últimos 3 mi provincial me ha destinado a trabajar en la educación secundaria, pero no jesuita. Me refiero a la escuela católica en Colombia. Y me han pedido que asuma también la escuela católica del continente americano. Me parece que lo que nos decía José Alberto esta mañana en su última filmina, en la última presentación, sobre ese servicio al Evangelio en la iglesia, esas características que se nos han dado ahora del modo nuestro de proceder, donde explícitamente aparece trabajar como cuerpo apostólico en la iglesia. Esa dimensión apostólica nuestra de colaboración con otros, creo que tiene mucho sentido. Y lo que me preocupa un poco es que a veces nosotros podamos hacer una decisión entre lo que somos nosotros como cuerpo apostólico y el cuerpo apostólico de la Iglesia, como si fueran dos cosas distintas. Yo sé que en el fondo no, pero en la práctica sí. Quiero decir, esta mañana corroborábamos también las grandes fortalezas del cuerpo apostólico de la compañía en educación. Y eso nos anima, eso nos entusiasma. Vamos adelante. Pero precisamente por ir tan adelante, por ser quizás exitosos, por ser fuertes, por tener una educación de calidad, se nos olvida que muchos de quienes están a nuestro lado nos tienen como referentes y esperan de nosotros esa colaboración. Es decir, que puedan contar con nosotros para impulsar en la misma dirección a la Iglesia y particularmente a la Escuela Católica. Para mí ha sido una experiencia totalmente novedosa esto que estoy viviendo en estos 3 años, porque vivía solamente en el mundo de la compañía y ahora he abierto los ojos a un mundo mucho más amplio y ahí me he dado cuenta de las enormes necesidades de la escuela católica en general y de la necesidad de articularnos todos como escuela católica para que ese bien sea más universal y en ese sentido más divino. Creo que no podemos quedarnos solo como compañía de Jesús en nuestro trabajo, sino que debemos ampliar ese horizonte como escuela católica para lograr una mayor incidencia y hacer que ese bien sea mucho más universal. Era un comentario, más que una pregunta. Gracias.
There would be not much for me to add except to assent and to affirm on 2 particular points. One, it is clear that we, as you said, we are an apostolic body in the church. And this was affirmed very clearly throughout our history, but especially in our last general congregation. But your point that the society needs not to be isolated in on itself, but to be ready to collaborate with others, including the church and other religious congregations and diocesan bishops. This is a point, again, which Father General makes repeatedly, that far more important for us than establishing a parish or a retreat house or even a school which is exemplary and which everyone praises would be for us to use the parish or the school or the social center to be of service to the local church, to the local community. Again and again, to remain Jesuit is to opt for communio. We do not see ourselves separate from the body of the church. Father General has reminded us at the last Procurator's congregation of a point that Father Kolvenbach made. He talks about a mysticism of loving the church, not in spite of her failings and defects and wounds, but precisely because of her wounds. So, not to challenge at all what Michael said, we live at times when living with and in the church creates problems for us. There are tensions and polarities, but we remain by choice and by God's invitation fully members of the church and in communion with the church. But by the Pope's own invitation, called to live at the frontiers, which sometimes puts us in positions where we can make mistakes and be misunderstood. And when that's the case, we rely on people like Father Lombardi and those who are close to the Holy See to help us realize our mistakes, how we can communicate better, and how we can live in more fraternal and respectful union with the Church.
I could, yeah. Let me, as a set of comments, I think there's a lot of truth, a lot of accuracy in the comments. One of the things I didn't talk about here is it has struck us in higher ed, at least some of us in higher ed, that we have a tool for inviting faculty into the work of faith. You know, when it comes to the issue of justice, they're on board. They have no problem. In fact, they're attracted to Jesuit education because they want to share in the work collaboration of building up a more just world. So we have collaborators who are eager on that dimension. The issue is the faith dimension. And I can't help but think that the tool we have, unique to us in Jesuit education, Jesuit work, is the exercises. If we could invite faculty to make the exercises, there is where you discover authentic faith and where authentic faith is playing a role in your life, where God is actually speaking to you. And while we often think of the exercises as preparing us for action, I think it prepares us for faith. It prepares us for deeper living. And we could use a concerted effort in all of our institutions to invite our colleagues to make the exercises with us precisely to discover the deepest roots of faith and the deepest roots of hope in their own lives, and that the project of building a better world and educating young people, exciting as it is, doesn't make sense without faith. And it is the church that we have to love, again, with all of her warts, but we have to love in order to know that we're in fact living in the true faith. So I just want to add that one comment.
I wonder if in closing here, any of you have advice for us in terms of new ways to respond creatively? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you, Jim. Sorry. The lights. Sorry.
Just a note of hope. I think Father Jim Hosey, I'm at BCI for about 24 years now, and before that, I was in Kingston, Jamaica at St. George's College, one of our great Jesuit schools in Kingston, along with Campion Center. After Vatican II, there was, I might direct this to Father Alvarez, the question of educating the poor. I didn't know whether it was a question of leaving our traditional schools that work with middle class or even others. But one thing that I found very helpful, when I was a scholastic young priest in Jamaica, after Vatican II, there was a conflict between working with the social action group or staying in the school. Happily, that was resolved by maybe one of the bishops' conferences or our own general congregations by saying social justice is a constituent part of the gospel. It's not for certain Jesuits. And so that was passed. The other thing about educating the poor, I think, for example, at St. George's College, which has poorer Jamaican boys, BCI that has more middle-class boys, what solved the dilemma of working with the poor or the middle class or even the better-off students was a much better religious education program, which also involved required community service. And once I was giving a retreat to the English-speaking Ursulines in Caracas, and I was there in '79 when they were fighting over leaving the Academia Merici, which was an exclusive girls' school in Caracas, and going to the barrios. I came back about 18 years later, and they had solved that question by keeping that school for middle and upper class girls and sending their students to the barrios. The reason that they stayed with the upper or middle class students was they knew that those graduates were going to be very effective in their country. So I think it's an important question you raised, but I thought those elements that shed a lot of light on it and solved some of the dilemmas. In other words, instead of either or, it's both. But the ones in the better schools are required to do a good RE program for the faith dimension and community service for the justice dimension. So there was really no major conflict. That's more of a statement than a question.
Thank you for the question, and I fully agree with you. I think it's not a dilemma. It's not a dilemma. It's not ones or others. I think it's a discernment question, and it depends on situations, and it depends on countries, and it depends on so many things. It's a question to keep in the heart and to pray for it, to pray about it, because I suppose there are many countries represented already here that still need a lot of leadership, good leadership for the future, and they can offer that. In some other places, perhaps not. That's a question that has to be kept in our heart in order to respond to it honestly and bravely, no? I think so. But thanks for the question. Last thing I would like to add. I fully agree also with you. This dilemma in some way, you know, in the past it created some difficulties inside the society that are not there at present and should not be renewed or should not come out again. No? So I think we need to find grounds for collaboration, and probably Fe y Alegría, the Cristo Rey schools here, the big effort that Indian Jesuits have been doing to educate the Dalits and the Adivasis and the GRS, the efforts of years, are some expressions of these new responses.
Just wondering, closing, if you have some suggestions or thoughts for us as you've begun your work in a new way in the Curia, in terms of being cross sectors rather than representing one sector. And one of the hopes for this colloquium is that it's not just a great gathering that stimulates conversation, but that we have some outcomes going forward in terms of how to collaborate to have a better sense and a deeper sense of our network. So I wonder if any of you have advice for us about new ways of proceeding.
And if I could ask you to sum that up in 1 to 2 sentences each.
Sure.
You can each have 2 sentences. It doesn't need to be one group sentence.
One of the things that strikes me, it's not a recommendation, but I think in this world of collaboration, to improve collaboration, is communication. I feel an occasion like this, where we come together, we realize immediately the value of coming together and sharing and telling our stories, whatever work we are doing. This, I feel, is not done sufficiently somehow or the other. And therefore, as I said earlier, sometimes we tend to move on parallel tracks and don't intersect.
The only recommendation that I would make is to call your attention to the fact that in some of your provinces, for example, Loyola, increasingly in Spain and in Colombia, there's a new approach, the plataformas apostólicas. In other words, look at, is there a way that we can begin to think about collaborating with other Jesuit-related ministries in our area? Can we work with the local college, university, social center, parish, even Fe y Alegría network? Is there a way in which our service of justice, our concern for a coherent, effective presentation of the Christian message over against whatever the challenges to faith are in your context, is there a way that we can be collaborating together in this network of Jesuit secondary schools, but also in the different kinds of ministries that your local context has brought into existence? How can we work together in a local area more creatively? Some of you are already shaking your heads like, yeah, right.
but it actually seems to be working in some places. People are finding a way to collaborate across the narrow boundaries of ministerial designations to serve a local community more effectively through the different kinds of ministries that we have.
For me, just one recommendation: think far, think in horizons, think in the world, and try to respond to it as best as you can. And I think then we will find many ways in which we can collaborate, because our mission is much bigger than the small mission that we try to respond every day in our offices and in our places. No? So I think we are called to collaborate with this God which is present in this world.
Can I add one quick thing? This is Father Nicolas, not me. He reminds us regularly that we're not, modest doesn't mean we're called to do more. And so as a result of having listened to the four of us, please don't think it means you have to do more, work harder, extend yourselves even further, but no, discern more carefully. Gather the data more rigorously. Pray for greater freedom, for greater detachment, so that, as Pachi says, the choices we make as communities, as apostolic communities, will be more effective, more responsive to the Missio Dei, to what God is calling us to.